the objective of my presentation is instead concerning the spin-off related to the Lithuanian case study. And then we will discuss about, first of all, what we start working on this spin-off project and what were the reasons behind of them. And then I will just introduce you to the methodological protocol that we identified in order to apply the super guide, the one that David presented before, to a real context. So to move from theory, let's say, to practice. So how the super guide can be useful for policy and decision makers in different levels and in different contexts. Then we will discuss a bit more on the main data and interventions analysis that we conducted for the Lithuanian case, based, of course, on the logic and the rationality of the big project of the super itself. After this analysis and interventions, I will present what we recognized as we, together with the ministry and of course the experts that we interviewed, what we recognized as a challenge for land use in the country. And then the point number 5, we will discuss about the policy recommendations. So how to achieve sustainable urbanization in a specific context, thanks to the design of ESPON Super. First of all, as I said, the spin-off was started by the request of the Ministry of Environment of Lithuania, which was interested to understand and to see how the super findings can be useful or can help the implementation of policies, specific policies and instruments, in order to address territorial development in a more sustainable way of the country. Of course, at the time that the spin-off was conducted, the CPRL, the Comprehensive Plan of the Republic of Lithuania, was under discussion and then was adopted later. So the main questions were, what does the current Lithuanian land use look like? So what are the starting conditions of land use in terms of land transformation, and how this kind of transformation look like? Which are the externalities which externalities play a significant role in the Lithuanian context? Of course, by looking also how to deal with contradictory policies. So if we can see contradictions between sectoral policies and land use policies. Then the idea was how instruments, which kind of instruments can contain urban sprawl, and then can be a reference for for the comprehensive plan, and which kind of insights in general the super project could be used for further develop the instrument and the CPRL and its implementative documents. Starting from the idea that we thought about how we can translate or transpose the Insigniam super guide into in understanding or suggesting a recommendation for a specific context. So then, before to start, we started before to start the activity. We started to think about how we can manage the data of ESPON Super and how we can translate them in policy recommendation for Lithuania. And this comes after different days of work with this methodology protocol that is based mainly on 4 steps. Each step has different activities and different outputs, of course. Based on this methodology, we can see that the first step was about defining the needs and priorities, which we did with the ministry. So the scope was to identify the main questions that we need to deal with. Then step number 2 was about several activities which went in parallel. And the first was about exploring the institutional context. Of course, for us, it's very important to know how land use is addressed in terms of institutional condition and arrangements. The second point was quantitative analysis. So based on data of Corinne data and based on data elaborated by our colleagues from ESPON project, we also try to identify some trends and to show specifically for the case of Lithuania, which are the trajectories of land use change. Then, in parallel with these 2 activities, we try to read the super guide from a country perspective, and the question was how the guide can be used without copy and paste, so no easy solution. We want to contextualize the guide without with not simplistic solutions. Then the fourth point was about conducting interviews with privileged stakeholders. So how land use is perceived and what are their opinion and also their desire in terms of land use. Then this activity have also produce some outputs, which the first was about methodology, the case study report, and the intervention database, because we also, for the case of Lithuania, we have developed an own intervention database that is actually collecting 22 specific intervention collected for the case of Lithuania. After these analytical steps, then we move to the most, let's say, useful for context, which is about drafting policy recommendation, where step 3 and step 4 was about drafting policy recommendation and validation loop with conducting a focus group about the relevance and the utility, let's say, of recommendations that we have elaborated at the first step, and this sharing and feedback loop has allowed us to finalize, to fine-tune the recommendations for both central and local level, addressing these recommendations for central for decision and policy makers at each level. About data and trends of land use in Lithuania, I will go very fast here because there are a lot of data, but what is important for us is to identify, what was important is to see which are the main drivers of land change and how, which kind of performance we can identify in the country. And in this chart, we can see that the population development from 2000 and 2018, so almost 20 years, we can see that all counties of the country have lost population. With different degree, I would say, because Utena country has lost more than 30% of population, while Vilnius just 6%. But this is the general picture, of course. Then one of the other drivers of land use change that we identified is the development of employment, and we can see that only Vilnius and Kaunas county has a positive performance in this sense, while the rest of country the rest of countries not, which is also significant from the land use perspective, but also how land use change look like, which is one of the first question of the ministry. And we can see that comparing to the rest of European countries, Lithuania is one of the least urbanized countries in Europe, with the majority of of countries that have less than 50% of urban use, except Kaunas, which is still under 10%. So we have we can see this also the picture taken from the Google thanks to David, and we can see that still the country is not so urbanized, of course, compared to the rest of Europe, but there are some changes some trends that we can see in the last 20 years. First of all, we can see that there are some cantons like Klaipėda or Kauna or Vilnius itself that have performed in this sense by increasing the percent of urban use in the last 20 years. Other countries they have lost urban uses. But also it's important to see that there is a not the development trajectories are not synchronized throughout time. We see that in the picture here that in these images map we can see that Klaipėda has been interested from development of urban use mostly in the last period from 2000 and 2008, while other countries previous the greatest development have made previously. So also this idiosyncrasy between the different territories in terms of development of urban use is very important also for policy and decision makers in order to take decisions in a more appropriate way. But also looking at the urban use per capita, we can see that in the majority, in 6 out of 10 countries, we see that there is increasing of urban use in meters square per capita, while in 4 of them not. So also this idea, the link between the number of population and the quantity of urban use is also interesting to locate. To better understand the country performance in land in terms of land use, but is also important to see also from the other side. So non-urban land use change, of course, as you can see from the chart, the share of agricultural areas in Lithuania, we can say that Lithuania, except Vilnius country and Alytus county, the rest of the countries are more agricultural than urban land use than urban in these terms. We can see also the case of Marijampolė, which I'm not sure the right pronunciation, but where the 73% of the territory is agricultural land. Which is important in these terms, of course, is looking at the conversation from agriculture to natural surface and vice versa. First of all, it's interesting to see and to have the possibility to show that there is a conversation of agricultural land to natural land from 2000 and 2008. But still, we have also some limits, but existing vice versa phenomena. So the conversation from natural to agricultural surfaces. Which are the dimension of these transformations? Well, in blue, you can see that there is a tendency that shows there is this idea of transformation from agriculture to nature, which is much more higher than the opposite phenomena from nature to agriculture. However, as this is a proxy, we intend it as a proxy of shrinking instead of the effect of nature policy oriented, the implementation of nature policy oriented. It's like we are losing populations, so there is a sort of abandonment of land use instead of renaturalization throughout a very clear policy orientation. But anyway, these pictures shows the difference, the multiple development models that we can see in Lithuania from the legacy of the communist regime, I would say, with this big blocks of apartments. On the other side, we can see the other style, like the American style, with the idea of diffusion of urbanization models, and and others mechanisms of territorial development models that we can see here the opportunity, the possibility also to reconvert. So there is place for regeneration, of course, but also there is place for new the imagination of new settlements, maybe much more influenced by Europe in this in this sense. Well, as I said, in parallel with the data analysis, with quantitative data analysis, we have also conducted some interventions analysis, so looking the practice of land use, and we collected 22 examples of interventions that are very different based on their type of interventions. So we have programs like the regional housing policy that have specific and implicit impact of land use, but also we have some land use regulations, rules and legal devices, vision and strategies, and also projects that at the end of the process are able to transform the territory, the land, in a more sustainable or unsustainable way. This intervention has been further classified in order to see the scale of interest, so at the national or looking at the different NUTS level, but also the type of territories that they focus. So from urban, rural, functional areas, coastal, etc., but also regarding concerning the scope of interventions. So the type of interventions in terms of densification, containment, and regeneration, the aspects that David presented before during his presentation. And then, of course, it depends on the type of instruments, so legal device, project, etc. Based on that, we also conducted a sort of successful. We try to identify the level, the degree of success of each of these interventions based on the opinion of experts that we interviewed during our interview campaign. We can see that there is the picture is not homogeneous. Of course, we have some unsuccessful examples, or rather than we have some successful examples concerning territorial land use and in a more stable way. But also we have some mixed success. Of course, then what we try to do is to apply the table that David showed you about the 3 dimensions of sustainability, so the economic, the ecological, and social dimension, based on the different categories, analytic categories identified, and indicators identified, and we can see that not all interventions are fully successful or fully unsuccessful, but it depends on their capacity, ability to achieve some sustainable objectives based on economic, ecological, and social sustainability. Then, based on these 2 different types of analysis, so qualitative and quantitative analysis, we were able to contextualize land use changes, and we can see that what are the challenges? Sorry, what are the challenges of Lithuania? Based on data, on territorial data, we are able to say that Lithuania is faced with a considerable demographic decline, as I showed before. So. This fact should be taken into account when identifying the future development trajectories. Of course, we are not anymore in the process of infinite growth of population, but in some cases we are experiencing degrowth in terms of population. Of course, not all parts of the territory are characterized by similar urban patterns and trends. Of course. So also the instruments that should be applied should have this specific question in mind. So it is a priority to recognize these differences. There is no linear relationship between demographic trends and urbanization. So we saw that some countries are decreasing in population, but increasing in urbanization. So this is very a point, I think, to focus on and to highlight. Fourth point is about urbanization and land use patterns are not synchronized, as I said before. So there are some areas that are involved in the process development in this period. Others have experienced more development intensity in other periods. Also, this calls for a sort of customized solution for urbanization and land use. And then this opportunity, I think, also this reality, this is the fact that agriculture, there is a process of transformation from agriculture to natural, but this is not. This seems to be not an outcome of a political vision. Instead of is a sort of rural abandonment. So is a matter of shrinking. What are the challenges from intervention analysis? The challenges are mainly related with mechanisms. So there is with mechanism and idea of strategic of how to imagine and to be future oriented. So there is a lack of strategic approach until the adoption of CPRL. There is no sufficient institutional and political long-term reasoning on long-term reasoning instead of applying short-term visions. There is a lack, or it has been recognized as a point, the lack of coordination among sectors that have some direct or indirect impact on land use. Also, there is a lack of cooperation between local municipalities. The high level of fragmentation has increased economic and even fiscal competition between municipalities. Then another point was about cultural behavior, as Carolis mentioned before. In this 20 more than 20 year, we assist of sort of change of cultural behavior also in terms of land use and sustainability, etc., etc. So also the political agenda should follow this general tendency. Then, last but not least, also it has been recognized as a problem the rigidity of plans. In some cases, plans are have indirectly support the diffuse urbanization. This has been done by overestimating demographic trends and thereby using too many development rights. This is, of course, this was the main idea during the first period of 2000, and then was everything was built about this infinite growth approach. Well,
sorry for interrupting, but could you make the last
yes.
part of a presentation with 1 minute, if possible?
Of course, yeah. Thank you. Sorry. Well, so policy recommendation. What we can advise, or what we advised in this spin-off. Well, for decision and policymakers, for decision makers at national level, we suggest to set a clear and future-oriented objectives, customized based on local priorities, to take a collaborative approach in order to increase the inclusiveness of stakeholders and public public actors. Use open and coordinated implementation mechanisms, which means try to include in their process all sectors and to create synergies between sectors. What about policymakers? Interventions, policymakers should have in mind that interventions may have side effects, and these side effects should be evaluated from territorial impact, from ex-ante territorial impact assessments. These assessments can be done within the strategic environmental assessment document or within specific mechanism, local mechanism. Incentives and these incentives can impact sustainable urbanization. Of course, policymakers should play with the idea is to incentivize or disincentivize some the ability of actors to transform the territory. Then the last is very important. Is about monitoring assessment in order to improve reflexive policy making processes. For the local level, we suggest to contextualize objectives and policies for decision makers. So to be much more specific and tailor-made, and to introduce tailor-made documents. Create conditions for place-based political cooperation instead of incentivizing competition among municipalities. Be open and supportive of public participation, as we learned from the rest of the European experiences. Public participation is very important because the higher is the public involvement, the higher is the capacity of instruments to really transform the territory in a more sustainable way. Then, for policymakers, no single special planning instrument is sufficient. We need to adopt an integrated approach with the rest of documents, from financial to economic programs, etc. Be aware of unwanted effects and trade-offs that each instrument can bring up. Include sustainability or consider sustainability in a more sustainable way in all phases of land use transformation, land use change, not only at the top, but also in terms of implementations, and improve institution capacity building. Indeed, what has been recognized that the public servants should be aware of the new idea of planning and should be able to control the old system in this sense. Well, what are the general lessons learned from ESPON, Super, and from the spin-off? Of course, applied research can benefit from spin-offs application to test in order to test findings, validity, and operability in practice. So the spin-off was very useful to move from theory and to practice and to see how this can be operationalized by filtering out, so being general concepts and transformative mechanisms, and to filtering in identifying tailored solutions. As a researcher, we are able to elaborate more customized recommendations. Then finally, acting in this way, we can increase the policy transferability potentials by avoiding any kind of errors that transferability brings up.